for Flabonga Monthrothacube. With Dale and Tony breaking all the rules, talking tech biz and straight up chaos. Quick fire guests, oh yeah, we slay those.
Good afternoon. My name is Dale Rodriguez, and this is Flabonga Monthrothacube. With me today, I've got my fantastic co-host,
Tony Stevenson.
and we've got our great guest,
James Nichols.
James. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate you being here.
You're very welcome.
Do you mind if we start with the basic questions first?
Sure. Over to you.
All right, we already know your name. What do you do for a living, James?
So I am the director of an organisation called Political Education for Students, and we work with schools, universities, colleges, businesses, other institutions to engage, enthuse and educate young people in politics, government, citizenship and democracy.
Cool.
In a nutshell.
Why do you do this?
That's a really good question. I, up until a year ago, was a head teacher. I've been a history and politics teacher for 18, nearly 19 years. And it's something I've just seen more and more as time's gone on, that young people are in a school system and an education system that does not prioritize preparing students to contribute through voting, through democratic systems in the real world once they leave. And more I wanted to do something that wasn't just dry information that happens occasionally when an election comes around, but creates an approach to education, working with schools that actually seeks to embed something systemic and cultural and inspiring about politics and government, and why young people should be involved and want to be involved, and to see why it's important. And obviously with Votes at 16 coming down the tracks, very cognizant that we are sending a lot of young people out into the world to do something really, really important, to make decisions and vote on people and ideas that are going to shape us all without any training to do so. We wouldn't let people start to drive a car without showing them how to do it. We wouldn't ask them to go and make other big decisions and give them other big responsibilities without any training. Yet as an education system, we seem to say it's okay to do that. And then we get angry at young people because we think they don't understand the world and they're detached from it. But actually, as an education system, what have we actually done to prepare them for that?
That's a fantastic answer.
It was, yeah, one of the best we've ever had.
Yeah, that's really succinct and really just fantastic. Thank you. This is going to, I can already tell this is going to be a fantastic episode. When it comes to teaching younger people about politics, how far back do you have to go to understand the politics we have today? Because my understanding is certain things that we have in place today are influenced by things that happened 20 years ago, 50 years ago, maybe 100 years ago. How far back do you go? Because I don't think anyone's really got the time to become an expert in history and politics like yourself. How much do I need to know to be informed today?
Well, it's a great quote in this, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it has a rhythm. And I think actually this is why I love and why I did history and politics, because actually everything's cyclical. The content might change, the specifics might change, the individuals might change, but the debates and the ideas come back around. So a lot of conversation that's taking place at the moment about the role of capitalism and the role of economic inequality is pretty much the same debates that were being had in industrial England. So actually the themes don't change, even if the specifics do. I think in answer to your question about how far back do you have to go, you wanted a very specific date in terms of
please.
At the moment.
If you could, that'd be. I'm not expecting you to, but if you could, that'd be amazing. 1997, 10th of October, 3 p.m. That's when it all changed.
Okay, I'll give you one. It's 4:45 in the morning on the 24th of June, 2016. The moment that the BBC declared that Leave mathematically were going to win the European Union referendum. There's obviously a lot that's happened in politics and history before that point, but if we go by the view that actually politics and ideas are cyclical, there's a lot of things that the Brexit referendum in itself encapsulated from previous politics, and there's a lot of our politics now that's still very rooted in Brexit. I used the statistic the other day that if you look between 1979 and 2016, we had 5 prime ministers. In those 37 years, we had 5. In the last 10, we had 7. And actually, a key root of that is because we did something really unusual in the British political system with the EU referendum. As a country that is always uses representative democracy, that gets our MPs to make decisions on our behalf, for the first time, we actually gave an exceptionally complex question, foisted it onto the British public, many of whom have not had political education themselves, asked them to make a binary choice, and then asked politicians to translate that into some kind of reality. And this clash of representative democracy trying to sort of fulfill a direct democracy vote has blown open the British political system to a point which we have the uncertainty, the polarization, the disengagement, the radicalization, the big question, the identity politics that I don't feel we really had before Brexit in the UK political system, I think all comes from the EU referendum. And then if we want to scale that globally, if we want to look at the idea of Britain's place in the world, both in terms of identity, economics, politics, if we want to look at the rise of Trump, who used the Brexit playbook to launch his first presidential campaign. Nigel Farage went straight from the Leave campaign to the Trump campaign in 2016. That's why it's no coincidence. Make America great again. Take back control. Very similar approaches to messaging. The EU referendum, if you want to look at modern politics, domestically and globally, go back to 4:45 on the 24th of June, 2016.
I'm not going to lie. I wasn't expecting you to give a specific date or time, but thank you. That was awesome. Okay, I've got a couple of questions in my head. One of them's a serious one. One of them's a daft one. What would you like next?
You choose.
If you were a biscuit, what kind of biscuit would you be that accurately portrays your personality and why? But don't just pick your favorite biscuit.
No, I don't really eat biscuits. It would.
Me neither.
If I had to, it would be a chocolate digestive, but a dark chocolate. I don't like milk chocolate. It'd be a dark chocolate digestive. I don't know why. That's
I don't know
just
why.
one that comes to mind, really. I don't know. I don't know. They're kind of just, they are what they are. You're not going to be, it's what it says on the tin. It's that's very much me. I'm quite plain spoken. I'm quite out there in what I believe and what I think and why I do what I do. And I think people know that when they engage with me. So
could you say that the dark chocolate instead of the milk chocolate is because you don't sugarcoat things?
Oh, I like that. We'll take that. I think that's a good one. I mean, I was going by the fact I just love dark chocolate.
That's good.
Yeah, I'll take that, Tony. Thanks.
You can have that one.
In your description, you said you've got some out there views. How out there are the views you're willing to discuss or share on this podcast at this time?
I think out there is in a sense that I wouldn't say they're radical, but they're probably radical for a lot of people at the moment. I think some of my views are that actually we don't have a right to not be offended. I think that's quite a radical view now, that there's a belief that I'm not allowed to offend you. That, and actually, my view is that actually everyone has the right to offend other people. That's, for me, free speech. The best way to challenge an idea is to argue back at it and to disprove it. My radical view is that that's okay at a time when I think there's a lot of sugarcoating and a lot of you can't say that because. And I think actually when you start shutting down conversation and when you start demonizing people for views that they don't stop having those views. They just look for more extreme or radical people that will share it. And once again, we're back to Brexit. The whole idea that if you're a Brexiteer, you were racist, thick and stupid. And actually, what did that do? It forced people to be even more against the establishment that they perceive to be calling them that. So I would say my radicalness is actually in my belief that no conversation should be off limits, because if you make something off limits, if you cancel it, people aren't going to stop having those views. They're actually probably going to believe them further. But they move into spaces, and we see this a lot online with young people. They will start finding forums online which are not in the public discourse to share these views. And that's where you get things like misogyny, racism, hatred, intolerance, because actually they don't feel they can have these conversations with other human beings. So they go and have them in the shadows. And that's
in their defense, racism is pretty funny.
Pardon, sorry?
in their defense, racism's pretty funny. I
Well,
should expand if you'd like me to expand on that one.
go on.
There are 1,000,001 reasons not to like me. I have many, many, many character flaws. Tony can tell you. The least worst thing about me is my skin color. Like, there's lots of that's why it's funny. Like, to dislike me because of my skin color, hilarious. To dislike me because of my character flaws, okay. It would appear I'm quite radical as well, because I also agree with you. Offense is upon the receiver. It's a choice to be offended.
Yeah.
Or choice to hold on to that offense. Like, someone can say something shocking and it can trigger you, fine. But then to continue that offense and hold on to it, that's your choice. You're doing that. I agree.
Yeah, well, that's what Margaret Thatcher said, wasn't it? And it's not just from left to right. It's not just right towards people on the left. It's and groups around race and sexuality and gender. It's also people that have conservative views, people who are labelled as dinosaurs or bigots, because they challenge a world view, particularly at the moment, that perhaps, if we associate left positions, don't like. And I think we're in a really interesting time. I became a head in 2021, so it was really at the sort of what's becoming known as like the peak woke sort of period. And actually, now we're coming out of that in many ways. It's really interesting to see how these principles are aligning again. So yeah, I would say the radical part about me is that I don't think anything should be off limits in a political narrative at the moment, which seems to sort of either hedge or sort of don't talk about it, or you can't say that. Actually, as I say, I think that's really dangerous.
I remember, do you mind if I just interject on that one? I remember seeing, I don't know what the name of the graph is, but I'm sure it's got a proper name, but it's essentially like, it's a two kind of line curves on a graph, and it moves over time to show how much overlap there is between, like, let's say the left and the right, or it was the Democrats and the Republicans in this particular instance. It was sort of like in the 50s there was this much overlap, and then basically kind of like gradually over time we've ended up in the situation where there's almost no overlap in between the two views, and therefore like they've almost completely separated in terms of their views of the world, which feels like quite a difficult place to be in, because then you've not got like a starting point of conversation of like, we can agree on these, but these are the bits we can't agree on, and then we can debate them with some, you know, agreeableness around, like, you know, we're all trying to solve the same problem. But like you said, if you can those conversations and don't have them, then surely those two graphs just trend further and further and further away from each other, which is probably not in the interest of.
You're absolutely right, Tony. And I'd say there's three things that have contributed to that, if you want me to expand on it.
Yeah.
Invention of Twitter, where we suddenly had to start putting complex views down to 140 characters. You don't have space for nuance in those debates. You've also got, off the back of that, you've got algorithms and, crucially, paid ads which are obviously rewarded through clicks. Reward extremist content. There are lots of people out there saying lots of extremist things that they don't actually believe because it's income generating. And the third thing I would say off the back of that is, in terms of social media, is the John Smith Youth Poll, which is every year, it's the University of Glasgow. They do the biggest survey of young people, 14 to 18, young people's attitudes towards politics every year. And last year they found that 64% of young people, 14 to 18, 64% used social media exclusively for their understanding of politics and the world. So when you combine all that together, actually you get this demarcation. And it's exactly one of the reasons why I do what I do, because actually, this is why I've got really complex feelings about the social media ban for under 18s, because the teacher in me absolutely has seen for 18 years the damage that social media can do. The politics side of me says, well, actually, if 64% are using it exclusively to get their political news, it might not be great, but at least it's some political news. If 64% of them are using it to get that, and we as an education system aren't doing anything anyway, then aren't we just going to make them more politically illiterate, which isn't that going to push more people towards extremes? Isn't that going to make more people disengaged and cause one of the very problems? So I think the social media ban for me is an example of a piece of legislation that on the surface is done for popularity and has some good, there's some low-hanging fruit benefits, but once you start looking into it, once again, back to controversial views, I'm not I don't always believe government and very big sweeping changes always have the consequences and fulfill the intentions that they try and do.
It always kind of works on the basis that people will continue to behave how they behaved before that came in, and that's not the case, right? Is it? People change their behaviours based on what, like, guardrails you put in front of them, right?
The genie's out of the bottle, basically. You can't put it back in.
No, exactly, right.
Just going to jump to the comments because we have some adoring fans who've been waiting very patiently for shout outs. So first of all, we've got Mehul, a good friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times now. We've got Debbie Hale. She's been on way too many times. We should never have her on again, actually. To be honest, she's lovely, but just too many times. And late, no less. We've got Zoe Whitman. Hey, Zoe. She's commented a few times. She says that you don't eat biscuits.
No.
Is that to me or to James? Like, we're happy to answer that and expand if need be. Again, feel free to ask James questions, by the way. It's one of the perks of this show. You can ask questions to him live. And that's why we've never had any real politicians on the show, because they're too scared. Debbie Hales agrees. Offence is taken, ready, given. I'm going to skip some of Debbie's comments. Sorry, Debbie. It's just that you have so many. And
Prolific.
Prolific. Thank you, Debbie. It helps with our views, though, and the algorithms. People commenting. Thank you. Love you, really. Kirsty St. John, she's saying hello. Again, another friend of the show. And again, Debbie, social media echo chamber risk. All right, we've been far too serious the last 15 minutes. I need a silly question other than biscuits. Tony, hot beverage question, please, good sir.
Question,
you're up, bro.
Cool. So, given the choice, do you drink hot beverages, James? Tea, coffee?
I'm an absolute coffee addict.
Excellent. Right. Okay. So I'm going to take that as that you would prefer to discuss the coffee arm of this question rather than the tea or hot chocolate arm of this question.
Always coffee.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Good man.
So, good man. Yeah. So if you can imagine that you were in a world where the small local artisan coffee shop that you like to frequent doesn't exist anymore, and we just exist with Change and Erica, what is your go-to coffee chain, and what is the one that you are going to avoid given the opportunity?
Well, given the area of Oxford I live in, where everywhere seems to be an artisan coffee shop with distressed wood and local artist pictures on the walls, I can't really imagine a world without them. Favorite coffee chain, if it's not an independent one, probably Cafe Nero. I love their Colombian coffee. I don't really like Starbucks because I don't know. I've got nothing against the coffee. It's just something about the branding of it.
Yeah.
James, as you can tell, you've made my day. Basically, we've been asked this question for the last 8-9 months now, and there is a heavy skewing to dislike of Starbucks. Like, there's like a lean towards Costa, which is my favorite brand chain ones, right? Yeah. And then, but basically, there's a consensus at Starbucks, apart from one other person.
I think
Starbucks is the worst.
I think there's been a couple. Yeah. So my favourite is Starbucks, and my least favourite is Costa, and that seems to be flipped and replicated quite frequently.
Like almost everybody, everyone.
I think Starbucks was what the artisan coffee shops were in terms of branding and messaging before artisan coffee shops sort of took over. Starbucks was your sort of statement coffee shop before we really had artisan coffee shops.
As someone who is newer to coffee, I should explain, I'm actually quite grateful to Starbucks. I remember it came out when I was like maybe 14, 15, and coffee culture was not a thing in the UK. Like, all I knew was granules. And it wasn't until I was maybe in my mid to late 20s when I actually started drinking coffee and went, oh my goodness, this is what it actually is supposed to taste like. It's delicious. So if it weren't for Starbucks, we would not have the artisanal ones. We would not have the other big chains that actually do a semi-decent cup of coffee that is not granules, because granules, like, they're not the same. They're like, I say this to many people, right? If I ever like to hang out with you and I came out to your house for whatever reason, and I didn't know what your coffee situation was, right? And you offer me a coffee, unless I know what the coffee situation is, I'm going to say no, thank you, for fear that you might give me granules.
Never.
So don't even bother. Don't even bother. Like, unless I went into your kitchen and I saw, like, the cafetiere or the mocha pot or the AeroPress, wherever it is, I'm like, cool. But if I can't see any of those things, I'm like, no, thank you, because they might give me granules and I've got to sit there and drink it to be.
I'd give you Sauvignon Blanc before I gave you granules.
This is coffee. It's wine. It's wine coffee. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, I took an interesting coffee story. I went on my coffee app last night to see whether I could apply a discount code that I had got for my coffee subscription. And I discovered that in the time that I've been subscribing to said coffee subscription, I have racked up a ton of points in my coffee subscription area, which I was completely unaware of. And I've got like 60 quid's worth of points. So I got myself a free AeroPress last night, which I was absolutely buzzing about.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely winning. Like that doesn't happen in like the age that we live in of like cost of living crisis and take, give, take. Right.
Also, usually the point schemes usually kind of run out after like 6 months or a year. They usually reset. But if you manage to accumulate that many points, either you drink that much coffee in a year, or they've accumulated over many years.
We go for about a kilo a month.
I must confess, though,
that's a lot of coffee.
That's 4 cups a day, basically.
Oh yeah, easily.
Right.
I mean, that's before 9 o'clock for me. I must confess, though, I have fallen in love with my Hotel Chocolat Velvetizer. I wasn't a big hot chocolate person until I was bought a Velvetizer. And yeah, that's sort of got me onto hot chocolate a bit more than I ever used to be.
We'll wait for Indy to pop up. So the coffee question started as just coffee, and then we added a tea branch to the arm of the question, which is essentially like what order does the tea, the milk, the water go in, and then we've now got a hot chocolate version of the question as well, thanks to Indy. So,
I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Tony. I'm going to try to. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tony. I didn't know the prestige and formula that could go into making hot chocolate until Indy was on the show, and she told us about the different type of chocolate, the different types of powders, different types of milks. Again, the velvetizers, the little addition things you can do with the creams. I didn't know it was a whole similar to coffee, like a process. So yeah, it's gained a new level of respect for me for the coffee. Gonna appeal to the audience real quick, guys. Have you got any questions for James regarding coffee, food? Or if you really want to, we can talk about politics and stuff again if you want to. But like, just ask them some questions. Could be fun. Now for the awkward silence.
We'll wait.
We'll wait. We got time. In fact,
I'll let other people have a go.
the less questions you ask, the more boring the show is for you. Because if you don't ask questions, then we don't talk, and then there's no offense to you, audience, but this is on you. Mehul, let me vet this before I read it, actually. Okay, there we go. Which government do you think was the most stable in recent UK history? That's not too loaded, I think.
No, I mean, the coalition. I mean, it's ironic that the only unelected government we've had in recent years, obviously a coalition is unelected. They make trade-offs, they make sacrifices to policies, they introduce new ones, has been the most stable. It's a nice little quirk of British democracy that the one government we haven't elected in recent years actually is perhaps one that's lasted its term. I think especially when you throw in that it came right off the back of the financial crash and it had to deal with the huge unemployment, huge austerity measures, and actually they are from the Lib Dems and the Tories were generally opposite ends of the political spectrum, or different ends of the political spectrum, that it managed to last. And I think there's a huge part that played in terms of David Cameron and Nick Clegg individually.
Yep.
But I think, that was the most stable. And as I say, it's a real irony that it's the only one really that wasn't elected. Maybe we should think about that a bit more. Do elections always lead to good government? Is there a difference between effectiveness and democratic?
No, I think we should just go back to a monarchy. Yeah, absolute power. Absolute power.
I'm not going to go that far, but
Crops,
I'm still putting himself forward.
Oh yeah, Rodriguez for PM 2043. Do I have your vote?
No.
I wouldn't vote for me either. I'll become a dictator. I've got some crazy ideas.
There's no secret about this at all.
Crazy ideas. I'd raise the voting age. Anyway, Kirsty St. John, I have a 19-year-old son. What's the best way to discuss politics openly with him and not argue? Ooh, that's a very good question, Kirsty.
This is the question that I was going to ask, pretty much word for word, apart from the fact that it's a 19-year-old son, because my son's not 19. So
I think when I see this in schools all the time, we start talking about politics through the lens of what we care about and what we know as adults. And we try and get young people to sort of meet us on our terms. So what do you think about this issue? Start by asking your son what stories he's coming across, what political sort of people he's interested in. I think there's a really good point here that the Charlie Kirk assassination last September really exposed that adults and young people are not even playing the same sport when it comes to politics anymore. That actually so many young people had, even if they didn't like Charlie Kirk or agree with Charlie Kirk, they had been exposed to Charlie Kirk because he was TikTok, Instagram, social media. Most teachers who the first time they heard of him was after he'd been shot. And actually, so many head teachers were saying to me, James, particularly our boys, are having a really negative reaction to this person in America who's just been shot. And it was because adults generally don't use social media for their news consumption. They certainly don't use TikTok. 28 is the switch age now for TikTok usage, whereas young people do. So in answer to Kirsty's question, don't ask their opinion on a topic that you identify or political stories you identify. And remember what I said at the start, everything's cyclical. If he mentions something that you don't really know much about, that's a great way to get him to talk about it. But then actually you'll very quickly find themes that you're able to contextualize within other political messaging as well. But I think it's let them have the voice and let them talk about the political stories they want to talk about. And maybe ask them, what do they do? And I'd be really interested in this because given the work that I do, actually, how do you explore that at school? What, if at all? What would you like to know more about? And if you think about it, we live in the most connected moment of human history. There's an answer to every question is out there. So actually, just getting people to start asking questions and for us to learn as well. I always find it fascinating that if you look at under 25-year-olds, the three most followed politicians on social media for the under 25s are Zach Polanski, Nigel Farage, and Zara Sultana. Actually, they don't feature in the top, those three don't feature in the top 3 most followed of anyone over the age of 25. So actually, we're still following Kemi Badenoch, Keir Starmer's, Andy Burnham's, Ed Davey, maybe. But actually, we're in 2 very different information worlds when it comes to politics. And I think the more we can ask them to talk to us about what they're thinking and they're seeing and they're believing, I think is really helpful.
Okay, we've got a very, very serious question, Debbie Hales. So serious, we're going to have to zoom in. Get serious.
Why am I so low?
I don't know. Why are you so low, Tony? Would you like a hug?
Yeah, please, mate. Yeah.
All right, cool. We'll hug it out. Very serious question from Debbie Hales. Deborah, thank you. Do you agree Cadbury's chocolate has gone downhill?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a big Cadbury's fan. I'm very much a hotel chocolate person, hence the Velvetizer.
So you really like chocolate? Like you're a chocolate connoisseur?
Yeah, dark chocolate. Yeah, I mean, I've never really liked Cadbury's, to be honest with you. I always found it quite powdery. Okay. Yeah.
Can we all agree, though, and I'm going to start some beef with our American friends, Hershey's chocolate is the worst chocolate on the planet?
Anything American, no.
Well, I wouldn't say anything.
No, well, in terms of food products, I've yet to find many things that are American that I prefer to Britain.
They do banging steaks.
Yeah.
Banging steaks. I'm sorry. Like an average steak in America is like a good steak here. You're right. Barbecue. But you're right. A lot of their processed foods are atrocious. Like absolutely atrocious. Sorry, Americans. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. Americans, not sorry. Okay, this is a good question. Follow up from Debbie. So I'm just making sure I'm not missing things. Bear with me. I'm going to skip that one from Kirsty. Sorry, Kirsty, that's too deep. Why, from Debbie House, why do you think Nigel Farage is in that top three you mentioned before?
I think because ultimately he says what he thinks. He's controversial. I think just because people follow doesn't necessarily they always agree. I think as well that if you look particularly, and this is happening now with Restore Britain, obviously Elon Musk is a power behind Restore Britain. So that's why Rupert Lowe is, for a party his size, getting 9-10% in elections and opinion polling. Why is he in the top three there? Because I think he presents himself as the outsider. And for a lot, you've got to remember, all right, okay, so 17-year-olds were born in 2008. 17, 18-year-olds were born in 2008. They were born, I know. They were literally born the year of a financial crash. They have gone from financial crash. They've gone from financial crash through austerity to COVID and lockdown to Ukraine, a sense of democracy in peril and imminent threat of World War III. So actually, for this generation,
tough ride.
Yeah, I mean they're often called the fractured generation, because actually for us we can look back at better times, even if we don't remember. We do at least remember 2008. We get a sense that not all is lost. Britain is not broken. But if you are part of this younger generation whose whole life, and you're now being told the world's on fire, you're never going to buy a house, you're going to graduate university with thousands and thousands of pounds of debt, actually someone who's going to come along and promise not only to change the system, but effectively blow it up, is actually really appealing. because they've got no anchorage point for this situation that they've been born into. So actually, established politicians, and this is why Zach Polanski's there as well, from on the other side, they're actually quite similar in policy perspectives, in the same way Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were quite similar in policy perspectives. They are both, Nigel Farage, like people on the extremes, are advocating not just changing the system, but blowing it up. And for a generation that do not see it working for them, who feel, quite rightly, they're about to be the first generation that is worse off than their parents, actually, why would you support the mainstream political opinion? And Nigel Farage, and now Restore Britain, and Zara Sultana for your party, and Greens, they are advocating not just tinkering with policy, but a fundamental change of a system which young people see actually is broken. And that's why. Because actually, how do you get people to appeal to mainstream policies when you see those mainstream policies and those mainstream politicians as a reason that you're about to, as I say, not be able to afford a house, probably have more debt than a mortgage if you go to university, and actually the world might burn down or blow up because of these politics.
One can only hope.
Do you think
James?
It was because Nigel Farage was on the Celebrity Get Me Out of Here?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And
Sure.
When we don't teach people about politics, we can't be surprised that this is the sort of things that they use to make their decisions.
James, who is your favourite Prime Minister and why? Or who was?
Goodness. It depends how you define favourite.
The one you liked the most, the one you favoured the most. Okay, we can break it down to a couple of categories, right? Who did you find the most engaging? Whose manifesto did you agree with the most? And who did you respect the most? There's 3 different categories, and they could have all 3, or it could be 3 different ones.
Yeah. That I've lived through. I would say David Cameron is probably my favourite in that definition. Not to say I agree with everything that he did. I think that he took. Me personally, the fact that despite even huge opposition in his own party, he supported same-sex marriage. I think despite the fact 136 of his own MPs made his life hell for doing it, I think that was a really bold move. I think the debate about Europe had to happen. Now, I'm sure there was some party management in that decision to have the referendum, but for 40 odd years, we've been sniping at Europe and complaining about Europe. I think actually from a point about leadership, giving the country the opportunity to say what it thought about Europe was a brave decision. I thought it was quite funny at times at PMQs. I think he is a very good communicator. I also, as I say, he lasted 6 years, which historically isn't a long period of time, but is like the gold standard of recent politics. He actually managed to start a term, finish a term, and win another election.
What's that? It's like 35 Liz Trusses or something.
Yeah.
I mean, to be controversial, I don't think Liz Truss was all wrong. I think Liz Truss went about it exceptionally badly. Also, you've got to remember she tried to launch this stupid, and this is her fault. She tried to launch a major economic realignment while the civil service had shut down because the Queen had died. I mean, there was a lot of mistakes, but she wasn't wrong to argue about growth. And actually, we talk a lot about growth now. She was making an argument about growth 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years ago, when other parties weren't. She wasn't wrong to how she did it was cataclysmically awful. But in terms of what she was trying to achieve, actually, there's quite a lot of merit in there. But yeah, you say that out loud and people look at you as though you're insane.
Well, again, you should be allowed to say what you want to say, and it's their choice to get offended, right? You're just saying an opinion. So I agree with that. I think that's reasonable. James, if you could eat one animal for the rest of your life, forsaking all others, what animal are you eating?
Lamb.
Okay, so you pick lamb. You're never having beef, chicken.
Lamb, always lamb.
Lamb.
It's my death rate deal.
Because that's a controversial choice, because a lot of people are either really for lamb or very against lamb, because it's quite a unique flavour of all the meats. So lamb every day, all day, if you could.
If I had to choose, yep.
Okay. When you were teaching,
Mhm.
let me try and frame this. But teaching is one of the very few professions where everyone's got some kind of opinion on it because it's so linked to politics. What did you find hardest whilst you were a teacher, while you were a head teacher, in terms of politics, people's opinions on your job, what you do? What was the one thing that maybe irked you the most in terms of commentary or opinions?
I think you're absolutely right. Education and politics are two of the few things we all have experience of. But unfortunately, when it comes to education, our experience is usually 20, 30 years earlier than what's happening now. But managing political events and trying to teach political events when children go home to views of their parents was always challenging. And I remember 2016, the year that kept on giving when it was for politics teachers. We had Brexit and Trump, obviously, trying to teach those events in a balanced way, perhaps in a school setting with a quite a monolithic political culture. There were some fun experiences there. And it's the same once again when you're ahead. And you're trying to make decisions for school leadership when you are in a particular culture, and you realize everyone's got experience of education and everyone's got experience of politics, or they've got views on both at least. So trying to navigate that, being a politics expert is in one way a blessing because you're familiar with the arguments, you can navigate them. It's also a curse because people assume you are just being political rather than being a head or a teacher.
I want to ask you a nice question now, if that's okay. All right. I know as a former teacher or headmaster, you probably head teacher, you probably actually cared about young people. That's why you did it. Most teachers are actually quite noble and they do care, most of them, right? So what is the one kind of eureka happy moment where you got through to a student? I'm not asking you to name names, but can you remember a situation where like you'd had discussion and you went, yeah, they finally got it, or I've helped them understand or learn and grow? Can you think of a particular moment in your career that happened?
Yeah, there's loads like that. I'm not trying to sound arrogant. There's lots like that.
No.
I think for me, the proudest moment I've had is, and it's not linked to politics, but it's linked to being a teacher. My first ever tutor group that I took through from year 7 to the end of year 11. So spent 5 years with this group of kids, seeing them every day, 3 times a day, and just building that relationship with them as they went from 11 to 16. And we talk a lot about schools in terms of the subject and the content and the education, but actually helping people just to become adults and find their way and to navigate challenges of being teenagers and forming their own identity. And I always found that being a form tutor was just as enjoyable as being a subject teacher. It's why I just contributed to a book called How to Be an Outstanding Form Tutor, because actually, even though it's often seen as the secondary role in teaching, oh, you're a form tutor as well, for me, actually, it was maybe right up there as one of the most important. And as I say, seeing those group of kids in 2012, so they're well over 30 now, seeing them go out into the world or going into sixth form or whatever, and go out into the world, having spent 5 years helping them and nurturing them and getting to know them as people, not just students or not just through my subjects. I think that's the real sort of eureka sort of experience for me, because I think so much about school, which we don't talk about, is actually the human side of it and the personal development side of it. And that's partly the reason for what I do now. Politics, yeah, it's about subject knowledge, but it's about enabling people to be tolerant, learning how to appreciate different points of view, how to compromise, how to negotiate, how to see other people as people, not just their political opinions. And so much of what I do now, I think, is inspired by that personal development side of being a teacher. I know it doesn't really answer your question specifically.
It does. Thank you. Appreciate it. I can see the gears in Tony's head turning. Tony.
I've just got so many questions, like thousands of questions about this type of stuff. So one question that I've got is why how with this, I'm going to change the question actually. How do you get kids interested in politics and interested in politics in such a way that equips them to hold the ideas in front of them and be interested in them without attaching them to their identity and strongly leaning in one direction or another because they've found the thing that appeals to them at that given time. Like, so, and the reason I ask this is because I tend to steer away from political conversation generally. And the reason I steer away from it is because I find it to be fascinating and interesting, but I come at it from I just love debating things, right? I actually love the essence of politics, right? The debating of the different ideas, and and there's never just one clear-cut reason or argument for anything, right? And it really triggered me when you were saying about how as a teacher you have to present a balanced view, and that sometimes I imagine is quite easy, right? But if you're debating like somebody that is a very polarizing character, where the sort of general ambient feeling around you and the people that you kick about with is that that person is either bad or good, to then go and then debate it from a like actually there's merit to what they were saying versus it's like a really hard thing to do, but also in life being able to kind of like take on different people's opinions and different thoughts and not get upset about it, so it's like you think that, so we have to disagree and we can't be friends because you're left and I'm right, or like you're conservative and you're Labour or whatever it is. How do you like instill that essence of like separation in that and get people excited about it?
Yeah, I think, and this is ultimately that's fundamentally what we do every day. I always say we present, not promote. So we make sure that we are very clear that we're presenting views, we're not promoting them. And the second, and it's why the work that we do, the main thrust of what we do is student workshops. Mm-hmm. And we've deliberately created 9 student workshops that are not knowledge focused. They obviously have knowledge in, but they are all simulations. So all 9 of our workshops are different simulations. And ultimately what it does is it puts young people in the positions of power and influence in politics. They're not being told what the answer is. They have to, in all of the simulations, they have to get there themselves. So a good example of this, one of them, our Government for a Day workshop, they become the British Cabinet. So they then start having to make decisions based on being a Secretary of State for a government department. And they start to then realise that everything's not simple. They start to realise you need to compromise and negotiate with your cabinet colleagues. They also then start to realise, actually, this political issue affects this topic as well as this topic. They come to the knowledge and the conclusions themselves. So all of the workshops are designed to get students thinking and taking ownership, because that's what gets the engagement. You're not talking at them about politics, they are living politics. And in that, they see the relevance, they see the complexities, they see the need to negotiate, they see the need to compromise, they see all of the different things that we're trying to get them to become when it comes about politics, but we're not telling them. You've got to remember, we only remember 10% of what we read and hear. We remember 40% of what we do. So ultimately, the very act of doing is the education. Also, I think as well, in terms of understanding of the world, another one of our workshops is we do a United Nations one. And we start off by looking at global challenges, and 9 times out of 10 students are really idealistic. We should do this, we should do that, this is a problem, we need to do this. We then give them a fictional country, and they then go on to the Security Council. And then suddenly, in the confines of their fictional country, we can't, if we do this, we're going to lose power. If we can't do this because our allies think this, we can't do this because actually we don't have the money for it. So we're not trying to, I'm often said, are we trying to make people cynical? We're not trying to make people cynical. What we're trying to say and once again, we don't tell them this. They're coming to this conclusion themselves by doing it. We're trying to get them to come to the conclusion that actually, if global challenges were easy to solve, they would be solved.
Well, absolutely right. Yeah, these are smart people.
Just make them cynical. Bring them to the dark side. Joy.
Well, it's very much the case that actually they get there themselves. They see it themselves. And the final line I always say in that is never remember, yes, we talk about being a global community, but the political system of the world is engineered around nation states. So in 2020, when we were the height of globalization, the height of the fact that you had George Floyd protests taking place in English schools, you had events around the world inspiring countries everywhere. But what was the first thing we all did when COVID happened? Up went national borders. We still live in a system of nation states, but we haven't triangulated that with global challenges. And students, you can tell students that, but it means nothing until they've experienced
Feel it, yeah.
to themselves. So that's why, in answer to your question, Tony, that's why we do it through a simulation approach, not a stand at the front and tell you everything you need to know.
Do you think?
Can I just ask? I've just got a follow up. Sorry, Dan. So you talked earlier, James, about 64% of young people exclusively using social media as their
not even social media, TikTok. 64% is TikTok.
Specifically TikTok. Wow. So like, how would you say to someone, young or otherwise, that would be a good way of acquiring, say you don't have much time to come to a roughshod opinion that's as close to reality as possible, like what sources to use? Because to me, the idea of 64% of the nation using one social media platform to educate themselves politically is utterly, utterly terrifying, especially given the unchecked nature of the vast soapboxes that people have on social media these days, right? As I know there's a lot to be said for mainstream media, but at least it does have some form of like accountability to being correct and, you know, and other bits, which they obviously overstep from now and again, and we haven't got time for that debate now. But the idea of the other, to me, is just way, way more dangerous. Like, what's the sort of quick fire? This is where you should go and ask people, and who you should go and speak to. And then, I'm sorry, Dale, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying don't use TikTok. I'm just saying don't accept it at face value. I think it's everything. Everyone needs a starting point. Just don't make that the end point as well. So okay, find your news story on TikTok, but actually go to BBC News, go to established news sites. I always say to my students, have BBC News as your homepage. Even if you then only spend 3 minutes looking at it every time you open your internet browser, at least you're starting to see other news stories. And once again, it goes back to what we're saying about Charlie Kirk, that actually what you see on TikTok might not even be a story on BBC News and vice versa. Mess up algorithms. Find ways to mess up your algorithms. So I make a point of having the Telegraph and the Guardian as part of my online activity, because I then ensure to cover both their bases, the algorithm gives me everything in between. And that's where it gets dangerous. And we start getting into echo chambers, and that's when extremism and intolerance comes about on the left and the right. I think it's not about not using social media. It's about making sure it's not the end point. I think it's ridiculous to say to young people, you should all be listening to the radio, or you should go and look at the newspaper.
Broadsheets,
it's not going to happen. But ultimately, what we can do is teach young people actually not just to accept that at face value, and to accept that actually, if you have 140 characters to an expressive view on Gaza, the chances are it's not going to be a particularly nuanced view of the history around that topic.
Mate, anything you can type with your thumbs probably not that important, generally speaking.
I always think that, like, just asking people as well. So have you ever seen the film The Big Short?
Don't do that. People are the worst, Tony.
No, I know, but if you ask enough people, they'll give you some breadcrumbs, right? But in the film, have you seen the film The Big Short?
The great film.
Talking about, we should watch that film. It's really
fantastic film.
Yeah, and they're like planning The Big Short against the crash in the housing market in 2008 and all that sort of stuff. And they basically go to some of these places in like kind of middle America that is supposedly kind of going to be the unraveling of all the AAA bonds and all that sort of stuff. And they just go and speak to them, and they run these like short clip interviews of like, I spoke to this person. They're like, oh, my financial advisor told me that if I just sign this piece of paper, I can have 4 mortgages and 4 buy-to-lets, and I can have 125% mortgage on each of them. So I've just took the cash out of that and spent all of that. And now I've got these 4 houses, but I can't really pay for them because no one can afford to rent them. So like, I don't know what's going to happen about that. And it really stuck with me, like the sort of go ask people thing as well. So
I mean, you've got to be careful asking people, because
of course,
cynicism, political education themselves. Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing for me, and it's not just about politics, it's in general, I've become a really avid TED Talk listener, and actually my view of the world and the things I've learned and the opinions I've formed and changed, TED Talks are brilliant. So I try and start my day every day now with a 18-minute TED Talk, and just even if you don't remember the content, the questions it poses and the things you think about, I think are great. Yeah, TED Talks.
I think the biggest challenge we face with politics and knowledge and understanding is critical thinking skills and discerning what is true. We now live in a time of globalization where there's more news than ever, negative news coming in from loads of different places. So you mentioned, again, people in the UK protesting George Floyd. I think when I was a teenager, I may not have heard about it because I don't live in America and there's only like 3 news stations, right? So things like that. But then also, like, again, just critical reasoning and thinking skills. You can go on the internet right now and see a video of Donald Trump singing in a red dress singing Roxanne, and it looks real. Now you have to question it and challenge it. And the question is like, what is, sometimes it hurts my brain. Sometimes I'm like, is this true? Like, I have to look at the source. Like you say, I've got to look at the counter source and then be like, okay, what is logically going to happen? I think that's the trickiest thing. Discerning truth nowadays is so hard because the video evidence isn't video evidence anymore. It's not video evidence anymore. It could be an AI. I don't know. But like, you've got to think about it logically and go like, well, what is the actual impact? Well, again, who's telling that story and why? Also another thing, I think.
I mean, that's in history, we call them the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why. Ask those 5 questions about everything. Who's written it? When's it written? Why is it written? Where was it written? And why was it produced? Ask those 5 questions and you're starting to think critically. And that's the case for everything, the 5 W's.
James, Debbie's in the questions again. I've ignored her recently and
Classic
she's back.
Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie, by the way. As much as I joke about it, Debbie, thank you for the comments.
Yeah.
How do you pick which talk to listen to? I think she's referring to TED Talks.
TED Talks. I often just let it randomly play whatever's most uploaded. And once again, it's algorithm driven. So you listen to things, it will send things your way. My favorite one, and it's quite a few years old now, and she's become quite famous, and I don't listen to her as much anymore. But I remember the very first TED Talk that Mel Robbins ever did. Don't know if you're familiar with Mel Robbins. She's become quite sort of commercial now, but her very first TED Talk was called "How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over," and it's still on YouTube. And the TED, I would advise everyone to listen to it. And it's all about just not waiting for motivation and actually just getting started with things and make decisions. You're never going to feel ready to do things you don't want to do. And actually, in many ways, without sounding really cliche, it changed my life. So Mel Robbins is someone that I will always listen to. As I say, I think she's been on a journey in recent years, but especially her early stuff. I often find, though, how do I choose? I'll either just, as I say, let it play randomly. I'm also quite a sucker for titles. If the title hooks my attention, if it just sounds interesting, I'll give it a go. I also will pick things I think are going to annoy me. I think it's good to listen to things that you find. So if it's quite a sort of, I'm probably quite, I hate this word, but triggered by actually quite a lot of the stuff Mel Robbins talks about. But I will naturally listen to it to challenge my point of view. But once again, if you're in marketing, the power of a title.
I really like Mel Robbins, some of the stuff she does, but I listen to her podcast, and you all know this, James, like when she gets told something that she finds hard to believe, and she just goes into this like, what? This like so over the top, and I find like, can you just get past this bit, please? Because I just find it's just so off-putting the way she does it. But
the very first one though was none of that. If you watch her first one, it's a world apart, and obviously people change and grow over time. Of course, I understand that. But there's an authenticity to that very first one that has always stuck with me. And I whenever I'm struggling with a decision or life choice or what do, I always go back to that TED Talk, How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over. And at difficult moments, I've watched it probably 50 times in my life now, and each time it hits differently. It's one of the few things I can point to is actually having, from a sort of book or podcast point of view, saying it's had a real impact on me.
James, in your experience and knowledge of politics, what is the biggest political mistake any party's ever made that you can think of? Or biggest / worst kerfuffle? Kerfuffle. Let's go with that. Good word. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's a mistake, but I think one of the biggest things that's gone wrong in recent years, we had Boris Johnson and Theresa May the wrong way around. We should have had Theresa May for COVID and Boris Johnson for the immediate aftermath of Brexit. I think if you look at one of the reasons why Brexit got off to didn't happen quickly after the referendum was you had a Remainer ultimately end up as Prime Minister, and then you had someone with Boris Johnson's, let's call them quirks, trying to manage a country during a very serious pandemic. If the two Prime Ministers had gone the other way round, Boris Johnson with the energy, passion and belief, arguably, to have taken the EU out, I think the EU would have taken him much more seriously in negotiations. I don't think you'd have had the sort of same issues in Parliament that you would have had with Boris Johnson. I think he would have won a majority if he'd called an election in 2017. And then you had Theresa May for COVID. I think both of those two events in recent political history would potentially have gone quite differently.
So is that a mistake on the Conservative Party for putting them as leaders at those times? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think it's just in terms of a policy mistake, a conscious mistake. I would probably. And I have a lot of respect for Tony Blair. Another controversial opinion. I actually quite like Tony Blair.
He's a likable fellow.
I actually have a huge amount of respect for him as a politician and a political figure. I think the Human Rights Act has sown a lot of seeds which are now being used against it now. So the whole debate about whether Britain should come out of the European Convention on Human Rights, I think comes about with the absorption of the ECHR into UK law. Because pre-1998, you had the ECHR, but you didn't have the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act was brought in to make the ECHR more legally enforceable in the UK. Because before 1998, if you wanted to take a case, you had to go to Strasbourg, it had to be deemed very serious. Now all judges apply automatically the Human Rights Act and ECHR law, which is how you can get, for example, people not deported because they might have poor treatment when they go, if they're sent back. But I think bringing the Human Rights Act into UK law has undermined the European Convention itself. And actually, we're now talking about leaving the convention because ultimately we don't like the Human Rights Act. But because there's a lack of political understanding about the difference between the European Convention on Human Rights and the Human Rights Act, we equate them together and we're at risk of destroying the convention because we don't like the Human Rights Act. So I think it was a policy mistake to bring in the Human Rights Act because it has weakened, and I don't think people realise that it's weakened trust in the ECHR when actually it's the Human Rights Act itself that's the problem.
I have two more questions I'd like to ask. Before I do that, I want to hand over to Tony to see if he's got anything else he wants to kind of
so I was just thinking, well, if you've got two more questions, I was thinking we could close out with a quick fire, but if you've got two more questions, we probably don't have time for that.
Well, I think we can make it really quick. The first one is, James, would you come back on again? It's been riveting hearing you talk.
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. And the second one is usually the one we kind of close with, but we'll do quick fire afterwards. Are there any questions you want to ask me or Tony? And we'll try and answer succinctly.
I think I'd just ask you, based on your own experiences, and if you can remember, if you've got kids or when you were at school, how much political education did you have, or how much do they have? Your kids?
So I'm 38. I had very little political education. I think people younger than me are far more aware than I ever was of politics at their age. Does that make sense? Like 15, 16, 17, I knew nothing. And speaking to young people today, and even a few years ago, like they're far more aware of politics than I ever was. So yeah,
not much. I think politics was GCSE that you could do at our school, or maybe an A level.
Yeah, maybe A level,
of which I didn't do. So yeah. Not very much.
Only 5,000 people a year on average do A level politics.
In fact, it definitely was an A level, but I didn't do it. Yeah.
Quick fire time.
Yes, right, James.
All right.
We're going to ask you 10 quick fire questions.
Okay.
And they are designed to be short, sort of one word, one sentence answers. Dale has to mute himself because he cannot be trusted not to interject. We shall go. Number one. What's one skill you wish you had, but you don't?
Artistic, drawing.
Okay. Favorite country that you have ever visited?
United States.
Favorite food?
Chinese.
What is your spirit animal?
Tiger.
Okay. Mine's a wombat. The book that you have recommended the most often?
Nuclear War, a Scenario.
Good answer. What is your unpopular opinion?
that all opinions are valid.
Oh, that's a good one. What is your best ever 1 in a million trick shot? Think like a hole in one, like that sort of thing.
Launching this business and this organization in year 1 and having the impact that we've had, it defies logic to have had the reach we've had.
Result. Who should we have on the show? Who would you like to see us into?
Who wrote Nuclear War Scenario?
They'll be writing that down, reaching out to him. Who are your celebrity lookalikes?
I'm told Michael McIntyre.
So I have a friend who looks just like Michael McIntyre, and we get into him about that. The most used AI tool.
Try not to use it unless I have to, but I'm really basic, so probably just Google Gemini.
Cool. Keeping it clean. What's the most adventurous thing that you've ever done?
Well, it's not go through a field of wheat. Most adventurous, probably parachuting.
Cool. And the final one for today. What's your special dish if you're going to cook something? What's that the thing that you would cook?
Lamb with a minted herb crust.
Sounds delicious. End of quickfire.
We are now on the hour. James, thank you for your time. You've been a fantastic guest. Tony, as always, you're awesome. I'm going to hit end stream. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Debbie, Mehul, Kirsty, for asking questions. It's been great having you, and we'll see you all, I think, next week.